Don't tell them you can see. This is what I found under the bed on a crumpled tissue with this sentence written on it. 3 months ago, I became blind in a car accident. In order to take better care of me, my parents and I moved to the suburbs far away from the city. Just last night, I miraculously regained my eyesight. Just when I was about to tell my parents the good news, I suddenly found a crumpled tissue under the bed. I have a strong obsession with cleanliness, so I took the tissue out. The words on the tissue made me frown. Don't tell them you can see. The handwriting on the tissue was crooked, as if someone had written it in a hurry. There was no one else here, and this they obviously referred to my parents. I had no idea who stuffed this tissue under my bed. In the past 3 months only my parents and my husband Ji Yin have come to my room. At this time, there was a sudden knock on the door, and my mother's kind voice sounded behind the door, "Mo, Mom stewed some bird's nest for you." I threw the tissue into the trash can. But when I opened the door, my pupil shrank suddenly. I saw a strange woman standing at the door with a bowl in her hand, looking at me with a smile. Her lips were painted bright red, and the smile on her face looked so weird. This was clearly not my mother. I took a step back and looked at her in horror. My mother looked kind, but this woman looked very smart. Her facial features were not similar to my mother's. But the strangest thing was that her voice was exactly the same as my mother's. I was about to ask who she was, but suddenly remembered the words on the tissue just now. The woman took a step closer to me worriedly and asked, "Momo, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" "Mom, just put the bird's nest here, I'll eat it later." I fumbled and sat on the bed. The woman continued, "Momo, the bird's nest is very hot, how about I feed you?" I immediately rejected the woman. "Mom, I'm a little sleepy, I want to sleep for a while, I'll let it cool down before eating." The woman nodded and went out without saying anything. When she closed the door, I breathed a sigh of relief. My back was completely wet with cold sweat. Where did my real mother go? Who is this woman? I was really worried about my mother, so I opened the door and went out. I walked out of the room and saw a man sitting on the sofa in the living room with his back to me reading a newspaper. This person must be my father. I looked around and made sure that the woman was not in the living room. I lowered my voice and shouted, "Dad." The man turned his head and I saw his face. In an instant, fear swept over my whole body. Because what I saw was not the face of my familiar father, but a completely unfamiliar face. "Mo, what's wrong?" But from the man's mouth, my father's voice came out. I showed an ugly smile and answered, "Nothing, Dad." The woman's head popped out of the room next to me, and her bright red lips smiled particularly exaggeratedly. Mo, didn't you say you wanted to sleep for a while?" I smiled and said, "Mom, I'm not sleepy again." "Then Mom will feed you bird's nest." The woman brought out the bird's nest from the room and fed me one bite at a time. During this time I was very nervous, afraid that the woman would find out that I could see, but fortunately the woman did not notice my abnormality, and the sweet bird's nest in my mouth tasted like chewing wax. I had no idea whether the woman had added anything to the bird's nest. "What's wrong, Momo? Your face looks ugly, and you are sweating all the time." The woman still found that something was wrong with me. She approached me with concern, but her eyes stared straight into my eyes. Her eyes were very big, but there was a lot of white in her eyes, and her eyeballs were very small. I pretended to be disappointed and said, "I'm fine, I just don't know when my eyes will recover." The woman smiled and comforted me, "Momo, don't worry, you will definitely get better." I showed a very ugly and stiff smile. The woman touched my head lovingly. After returning to the room, I immediately locked the door and sat on the bed with a look of fear. Half a month ago, my husband Ji Yin came to visit me once. My husband is a captain and his work is very busy. At that time, he and my parents had a lot of conversations, and he was even spoiled by my father and got drunk, and spent the night in the villa. In other words, half a month ago, my parents were still my real parents. I found my phone. When I couldn't see it before, I had been using voice mode. I immediately called Ji Yin and the call was quickly connected. Ji Yan's voice was as gentle as ever. Momo, what's wrong? I just got off the plane and can come to see you soon. I said in a hurried tone. Ji Yan, what I'm going to tell you next may seem incredible to you, but what I said is true. Ji Yan was silent for a moment and then said, Momo, as long as you say it, I will believe it no matter what. I told Ji Yan everything. It takes about an hour to drive here from the airport. I felt much more at ease when I thought that Ji Yan would come. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door outside. Momo, it's time to take medicine. I heard my father's voice outside. But I knew it wasn't my father. It was that strange man. My heart beat faster and I stared at the door. Seeing that I didn't say anything for a long time, the man began to turn the doorknob. Why is the door locked, Momo? If you don't take medicine, your eyes will not get better. The man urged me to open the door, and I was determined not to open the door no matter what, unless Ji Yan came over. Are you asleep, this little guy? The man smiled helplessly. Then I heard his footsteps coming downstairs, and I was relieved. Suddenly I felt something was wrong again, and I had a strong feeling of being watched. I hurried to the door and listened to the movement outside. There was no sound outside the door, and it sounded like the man had left. I was worried and lay down carefully, trying to see the movement outside through the crack in the door. And at this moment, I met a pair of eyes with small eyeballs and a lot of white. The man was lying under the crack in the door, staring at me with his eyes, and I was sweating all over at that moment. I pretended not to see it, and slowly fumbled on the ground. It was strange that my mobile phone had just fallen to the ground, and the eyes disappeared from the crack. I collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. They were very strange. This weird man and woman appeared beside me, and there must be an ulterior motive. I don't know where my parents have gone. Now, the only thing I can do is wait for Ji Yan to come. After waiting for an hour, I finally got a call from Ji Yan. Ji Yan's voice on the other end of the phone sounded very anxious. Momo, where are you now? Ji Yan's words made me feel very strange. I'm in the villa. You've been here before. You didn't find the wrong place, did you? I was also very anxious. Ji Yan said very puzzledly, I'm in the villa, but you and your uncle and aunt are not here. It's covered with dust, as if no one has lived here for a long time. His words also shocked me. Ji Yan also sent me a photo. I saw that the photo was indeed in the villa, but it was really as Ji Yan said. The villa was full of dust and it seemed that no one had lived there for a long time. The sofa was covered with thick dust, and there was even a layer of spider webs in the corners. This is clearly different from the villa I'm in now. But the layout is exactly the same as the villa I'm in. Suddenly I remembered that the man had put a newspaper on the coffee table before, and I quickly asked Ji Yan to take a photo for me. The photo came quickly. In the photo, there was indeed a newspaper on the coffee table. Judging from the time, it was today's newspaper. My heart beat very hard. The hand holding the phone kept shaking. At this moment, I almost collapsed. Ji Yan, I'm in the villa. You don't believe me, and I can video chat with you. What happened? Am I still alive? Momo, don't cry. I absolutely believe you. What nonsense are you talking about? I have called the police. Don't be afraid. Listen to me now. Although I don't know what's going on, don't let them find out that you can see it before the police arrive. Although I don't know what their purpose is in pretending to be uncles and aunts, they should not hurt you at present. As long as you don't reveal the flaws, how much power do you have on your phone? I need you to keep talking to me. I looked at the power of my phone. I don't have the habit of charging before going to bed, so the power of my phone is only 15%, which can't last long. I hurried to look for the charging cable, but strangely, I couldn't find it after searching the whole room. I suddenly remembered that last night, when I didn't know my parents were fake, I had chatted with the couple at the dining table. At that time, I was listening to a novel while charging my phone, and I must have forgotten the charging cable there. The charging cable is downstairs. I went to get it. Looking outside the door, I gritted my teeth, turned the door, and went out. The corridor was very quiet, and it seemed that the couple should be in my parents' room. I walked downstairs quickly and came to the restaurant, and saw that the charging cable was indeed there. I was delighted, and just as I was about to unplug the charging cable, I felt something strange behind me. I turned my head and saw an expressionless face. The woman's face was very close to me, and the corner of her mouth cracked into an exaggerated arc. Momo, I just realized that you walked up the stairs much faster than before. Can you see it? Fear rose from the soles of my feet to the top of my head at this moment, and my heart beat very hard. The woman's eyes with too much white stared at my eyes. Mom, I will tell you if I can see it. It's just that my phone is out of battery, so I am in a hurry to walk. I have lived here for more than 3 months, so I walk fast naturally. I said very naturally. The woman smiled, stretched out her hands with bright red nail polish, and touched my face. Her fingers were as cold as snake skin, which made me shiver. I thought Momo could see it, but my mother was happy for nothing. If Momo can see it, don't hide it from Dad and Mom, otherwise we will feel unhappy. Come on, give your phone to Mom, Mom will charge it for you. The woman took my phone, she looked down at my phone and asked, "Are you still talking to Ji Yan?" I was so nervous. Ji Yan's voice came from the other end of the phone. Mom, I didn't spend too much time with Momo before. This time I asked for 14 days of leave to come back to accompany Momo. The woman smiled and said, "Come here quickly, let your dad make your favorite braised pork. Momo misses you so much." I hung up the phone for Momo to charge. It's too unsafe to answer the phone. Her voice and tone sounded like a good mother who loves her daughter very much. But only I know that she looks like she is staring at the phone, but her eyes are looking at me sideways. After the woman left, my back was already wet with cold sweat, and even my legs couldn't help shaking. Since Ji Yan can't find this place, I must leave the villa. I decided to leave here immediately when my phone was charged to 30%. Suddenly, I heard a creak sound from the kitchen. The door of the cupboard suddenly opened a gap. I looked over in the direction of the sound, but was frightened and turned pale. A pair of pale, bloodless hands in the cupboard drooped softly. On the fingers of these hands, there was a black mole that I was very familiar with. This was my mother's hand. My eyes were red, and my whole body was trembling. I walked to the side of the cupboard, step by step. These hands had no temperature, and even turned blue. It was obvious that they were not the hands of a living person. My mother was not missing, but was murdered. This man and woman killed my mother and hid here. At this moment, my first reaction was to run. When I turned my head, I saw the man walking towards me with a smile. His sight first fell on the hand outside the cupboard, and then he looked at me fiercely. "Mo, what are you doing here? Why are your eyes so red? It looks like you are crying." The man's voice was very concerned. But I clearly saw him pick up a sharp fruit knife from the knife rack on the side. The man walked towards me with a fruit knife. Suddenly, he raised the fruit knife and stabbed it towards my eyes. The tip of the knife stopped at 1 centimeter from my eyes. At this moment, I burst into a strong desire to survive. There was only one thought in my mind: I can't be seen. Seeing that my eyes did not blink, as if I didn't see the fruit knife in front of me, the man slowly put down the knife. "I heard from your mother that Ji Yan was coming over, and Dad came to make his favorite braised pork." The man smiled and put down the knife, and then I saw him open the cupboard, and my mother's head was exposed. The bulging eyeballs looked straight at me, and I almost screamed, but I still pretended not to see it and smiled at the man. But the next scene made me more frightened and angry. I saw the man open the cupboard, and my mother's body rolled out. He picked up the body and threw it on the table like throwing an animal's body. Dad recently got a good black pig, and Ji Yan had a good meal tonight. I watched helplessly as the man gave me a malicious smile, then raised his kitchen knife and chopped it down. My stomach was churning, and at the same time I was overwhelmed with sadness and despair. I wanted to leave, but the man stopped me. "Momo, help Dad. This meat is a little hard to cut, you help Dad hold it. This man is so vicious. Or he wants to test my reaction. I can never watch the man dismember my mother without expression." I adjusted my breathing and said with a smile, "Dad, I'm a little tired and want to go back to rest." The man also smiled and said, "Then you go to rest, Dad will handle it here." After returning to the room, I couldn't control my emotions anymore and burst into tears. My beloved mother died, and I watched her disintegrate with my own eyes, and it is very likely that my father was also killed. I took a deep breath and called the police. I told the police about my experience and told them the address of the villa. The police asked me to lock the door and stay inside, and told me that they would be here within half an hour. After hanging up the phone, I immediately locked the door. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Ji Yan. "Momo, are you okay?" Hearing Ji Yan's voice, I was completely broken. "I'm fine, but I saw my mother's body." Ji Yan was silent for a moment. "Momo, you have to cheer up. I know you are very sad now, but now, the most important thing is to ensure your personal safety. Ji Yan is right, now is not the time to be sad. There is still half an hour before the police arrive here. In this half an hour I must ensure my own safety." Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming upstairs, and the man's voice sounded from behind the door, "Momo, Dad has made braised pork, come down to help Dad taste it?" I was very angry when I heard the man's words, and I stared at the door tightly. "Dad, I don't want to eat now." Then the woman's voice also sounded outside the door, "Momo, come out, Mom will help you massage your eyes. The doctor said that more massage is needed to speed up blood circulation." "Mom, I want to be alone for a while," I said nervously. At this time, the sound of the key being inserted into the lock sounded, and the woman actually matched the key to my room. As the door handle turned, I immediately hid under the bed. Someone actually wrote lines of words on the bottom of the bed with a black pen. But before I could take a closer look, I heard a creak and the door opened. "Momo, where are you? You are so old, are you still playing hide-and-seek with your parents?" The woman's voice sounded particularly strange. I covered my mouth and held my breath, not daring to make a sound. The door of the closet was opened, and the door of the bathroom was also opened. I shrank myself in the corner, praying desperately that they would not find me, but my prayer did not work, and two expressionless faces appeared under the bed. They all showed me a weird smile. "I found you, Momo." I tried hard to hold back the scream that was about to burst out of my throat. "Mom, do you remember playing hide-and-seek together when we were young? I missed the time at that time a little, so I played hide-and-seek with you." I smiled and groped my way out. The woman looked at me and suddenly sighed. "You kid, that time when I was a child, I still remember you hiding in the pigsty, and you were dirty when I found you." Her words shocked me. This is indeed what I experienced when I was a child. How did the woman know? After my mother found me from the pigsty, I had a fever for a day and a night. It was my mother who carried me to the town hospital for treatment. The woman smiled, with a nostalgic look in her eyes. "After that, you had a fever. At that time, our family was poor and had no car, and your father happened to be on a business trip, so I carried you to the town hospital. You vomited all over my back. My nails were deeply embedded in the palm of my hand." She actually said these very detailed things word for word. Seeing that I was silent, the woman came over and touched my head and said, "Momo, Ji Yan really went too far this time. Mom was kind to him for your sake, but Mom and Dad both hope that you and Ji Yan will divorce. How can our Momo, who is so good-tempered, be matched with a bad guy like Ji Yan?" I looked at the woman in shock. "Ji Yan? What happened to Ji Yan?" I saw the woman and the man look at each other, and the woman said tentatively, "Momo, have you forgotten what happened before the car accident? You went to the airport to look for Ji Yan, and saw Ji Yan and a stewardess walking out hugging each other. You ran out in a rage, and then got into a car accident. After waking up, you became very strange. It seemed that you had no memory of Ji Yan at all. We were afraid of upsetting you, so we didn't dare to mention it, and pretended that we didn't know." I sat on the bed limply, and it turned out that this was the reason for my car accident. No, I can't believe what they said. They are clearly the murderers of my parents. I decided not to pretend anymore and said coldly, "You are not my parents, I saw it all. The woman showed great surprise on her face, rushed forward and held my face. Can you see it? Great, daughter, Mom is really happy. I pushed her away. Don't pretend that you are my mother anymore. My mother has been killed by you, and her body has been made into braised pork by you. The man looked at me blankly. Mo, what are you talking about? Your mother is here. What body? You still have to pretend? I rushed downstairs and came to the kitchen, but the kitchen was clean, there was no blood, and there was no body of my mother on the ground, but a huge pig head. The man said helplessly, this pig was just transported from the countryside by my father yesterday, in order to replenish her body. I opened all the cabinets in the kitchen like crazy, but my mother's body disappeared. The woman suddenly cried loudly. The doctor reminded us before that you might have some sequelae of the car accident. But we didn't take it seriously. What's wrong with you now? Mom and Dad are here. I turned my head and stared at the two strange faces. What evidence do you have to prove that you are my parents? The woman wiped her eyes and took out her phone tremblingly. I noticed that there was a black mole on her finger that was exactly the same as my mother's. The woman showed me the photos on her phone. In the phone, I was snuggling with them and smiling very sweetly. The date shown on the photo was exactly 3 months ago, when I was not blind. I turned pale and retreated step by step. I couldn't believe what I saw. The man's veins were bulging with anger. It's all Ji Yan. If it weren't for him, my daughter would not be like this now. I stared at them blankly. Am I really sick? They are my real parents, but I had hallucinations because of my illness and mistakenly thought they were not my parents. Mom and Dad, I need to go back to the room to calm down. I couldn't wait to know the truth, and this time they didn't stop me. The man nodded with a heavy face. I walked upstairs in a daze. If what they said was true, and I was the one who was sick, then what about the tissue under the bed? I stood upstairs and saw them sitting on the sofa, looking worried. I took a photo of their faces and sent it to Ji Yan. Ji Yan quickly replied to me, Momo, aren't my parents fine? They are really my parents. It turns out that all this is true, and I am the one who is sick. I returned to the room in a daze. Ji Yan, you cheated, right? Ji Yan was silent for a moment. Momo, you did see some things that made you misunderstand. But please believe me, I really didn't cheat. I don't really care whether Ji Yan cheated or not. Even if I was really sick, there are still many doubts here. First, where is Ji Yan now? From the photos he sent me, he is indeed in a villa with the same layout as here. Second, who wrote the tissue under the bed? All kinds of doubts lingered in my mind. I remembered the words I found under the bed before, but I didn't have time to read them clearly, so I quickly crawled under the bed. By Mo, I left that tissue. I am you in the last cycle, and you are now repeating the same thing. This is your 5th cycle. Although it sounds incredible, the 2 people below are not your parents. Don't believe anything they say, and don't believe Ji Yan. Don't believe what he said about the existence of another identical villa. Use your brain to think about it. The photos he provided you can be done through PS. At the end of each cycle, you will lose the memory of the previous cycle. But you are lucky in the 4th time, you retained your memory. These words are for you who are now experiencing the 5th cycle. Don't believe the words of the police, they will not help you. You will die at 8 o'clock in the evening and enter the 6th cycle unless you kill them before that. Maybe you don't believe what I say, but Ji Yan will do everything he can to stop you from killing them, and he will make up all kinds of lies. Mo, are you still listening to the phone? Ji Yan asked. I calmed down and said, Ji Yan, I want to kill them. No, Mo. You can't kill them, you can't do it. I hung up the phone directly, opened the door quietly, and saw them standing in the kitchen, eating the plate of braised pork with relish. My heart was beating very fast. I felt that she didn't seem to trust us very much, so it was better to kill her. Why do I feel that she seems to have come out? Suddenly, the man raised his head and looked in my direction. I shrank back suddenly, my chest rose and fell violently, and I heard footsteps coming upstairs. Mo, where are you, my good daughter? I hid in the closet, holding a carving knife in my hand, and my palms were soaked with cold sweat. It seemed that there was a heavy rain outside the window, and a huge thunder sounded. I saw a pair of eyes close together in the gap. "Found you." I was dragged out by the man, and the woman grabbed my shoulders tightly. "Mo, why don't you believe us? You are sick, you are very sick. Mom and Dad are going to take you to the hospital." My heart was pounding, and I bit the woman's hand with all my strength. The woman retracted her hand in pain. I raised the carving knife and stabbed the woman's arm. Mo. Ji Yan stood behind me panting, and I turned my head to see his pale face. "Mo, what are you doing? They are your parents, and you are sick." Ji Yan took out a report and threw it at me fiercely. I picked up the report, which contained my mental evaluation certificate. The report said that my mental state was extremely unstable, accompanied by symptoms such as delusion and hallucination. Mo, listen to my explanation, I did not cheat. At that time, the colleague fell down, and I helped her up. "You have always been very sensitive and suspicious, and you are very strict with me. These are not important, but I didn't expect that you would not even listen to my explanation and ran out, which led to the car accident. Mo, your parents have worked hard to take care of you, put down the carving knife." Ji Yan looked at me solemnly, and the woman also looked at me with tears, ignoring the pain of her wounds, looking at me with a sad face. At this time, that sentence appeared in my mind again. "Ji Yan will make up all kinds of lies to stop you." Many scenes appeared in front of my eyes in an instant. My mother carried me to the hospital in the town, but I accidentally vomited all over her. My father smiled honestly and took out a little orange cat that I had been thinking about from behind. The day I was admitted to a key high school, my father, who had never cooked before, clumsily cooked a table of delicious dishes for me. Their faces appeared in front of me, gentle and kind. They have the best qualities of being a parent. But their faces are definitely not the faces of the man and woman in front of me. No matter what my parents look like, they will not make me feel terrible and weird. I made up my mind, and under Ji Yan's shocked eyes, I cut the throats of the man and woman. I thought they would resist, but unexpectedly they didn't. Their eyes were full of hatred and a flash of fear. At this moment, everything in front of me was formatted and broken into many small pieces. I saw Ji Yan standing there, looking at me motionlessly with complicated eyes. "You did it, Mo." My voice came out of his mouth, and finally, Ji Yan disappeared. My parents, real parents, appeared in front of me. They held hands and looked at me with a smile. Mo, you did it." Tears couldn't help but flow from my eyes, and finally they turned into small pieces and disappeared in front of me. "Dr. G, Mo has woken up." Ji Yan took off his glasses and smiled. "She has successfully defeated herself in the 5th hypnosis. How is she feeling now?" "She has been crying, I think she is not used to it yet. Let her calm down. Let's sort out the recovery process of Mo's illness." Mo, female, 26 years old, sensitive and cowardly, a typical people-pleasing personality. Half a year ago, Mo went on vacation to a villa in the suburbs with her parents. It was at that time that Mo encountered the nightmare of his life. Li Daqiang and Wang Suilan, a couple who committed all kinds of evil, were wanted criminals by the police. During their escape, they saw a nice car parked at the door of the villa and thought of robbing it. Li Daqiang and Wang Suilan pried open the lock of the villa and entered it. It was late at night, and Mo and his parents were all asleep. Li Daqiang and his wife wanted to rob some money and leave, but unexpectedly, Mo's mother suddenly came out to go to the toilet. They brutally killed Mo's mother, and Mo's father was awakened by the screams. He was very smart and immediately realized that his wife had an accident. He ran to Mo's room while the criminals were not paying attention. He woke Mo up and asked Mo to hide under the bed. Li Daqiang and Wang Suilan soon found Mo's father. Mo hid under the bed and watched his father's throat being cut. Before Mo's father died, he made a mouth shape to Mo, "Don't be afraid." After Ji Yan narrated Mo's experience, he pushed his glasses. After that, Bayamo suffered from survivor syndrome. She felt extremely guilty and resented why she didn't run out to help her father. Because of her own cowardly and inferior character, Bayamo has been living in pain. She even began to have complications such as hallucinations, and Bayamo imagined that her parents were still alive. But according to her description, she saw the faces of Li Daqiang and Wang Suilan. In order to treat her condition, I hypnotized her. Bayamo regarded me as her husband and constructed my identity in her mind. I am her backbone and her subconscious instinct. When she saw her father being killed, her instinct as a human being was fear and terror. So Ji Yan would do everything he could to stop her from taking that brave step. My identity inside symbolizes Bayamo's cowardly instinct to stop her. But she eventually overcame this fear and she was forgiven by herself. An intern asked curiously, "Dr. G, what's the matter with the identical villa mentioned by the patient?" That villa is the villa where Bayamo experienced the murder of her parents in reality, and she constructed another villa in her heart that bound herself. After Ji Yan finished his explanation, he came to the room to visit Bayamo. Bayamo burst into tears, but Ji Yan knew that she had come out of it. Perhaps the greatest pain of a person is that he cannot even forgive herself. The end.